Hi there. PDD Holdings has reported the results for the last quarter, Q3. And the growth rate was quite great, amazing. 44% year over year. Now, if you are planning to invest in this company, be very careful. Because if you don't understand the market, the competition, you'll get burned. Be very careful. You want to take advantage when the stock price is low and sell when it gets higher. That's the aim, right? Now, if you look at PDD Holdings, they are doing quite great. Revenue, the growth rate for the revenue year over year was over 40%, and also for their operating income, over 40%. And on top of this, amazing growth rate, profits and revenue, they also have a lot of cash. As you can see, they have 44 billion in cash and short-term investments. And you look at the market cap, it's only 100, close to 140 billion. And the PE ratio is close to 10. So, at the current stock price, PDD Holdings can deliver 10% easily per year, without including their growth rate. If PDD Holdings keeps growing more than 10%, then your return will be much higher. Now, it's important to look at the competition and also at the growth rate of PDD Holdings. As you can see, year over year, the growth rate was amazing, over 40% for Q3, Q2 over 86%, and Q1 over 131%. Now, pay attention to this growth rate, year over year, right? From 131% went to 86% and then to 44%. What do you understand by this? Well, the growth rate is slowing down. And that's why also the stock price is slowing down. The growth rate isn't that much as it was in the past, over 400%, but slower. However, PDD Holdings or Pinduoduo is the best performer of China, because while all Chinese companies went down from 2021 to today, a decline over 80%, PDD Holdings is the only one that succeeded to rebound and deliver a return over or close to 200%. That's amazing. And that happened because of their amazing growth rate, which now is slowing down. So you see this decrease in their growth rate. Be aware of this, because the stock price depends on that. Then look at the growth rate quarter by quarter from the previous quarter, let's say Q2, from Q3 to Q2. You see their total revenue about 14.1 billion, right, in Q3. And then in Q2 was about 13.3 billion. And Q1, 12 billion. So they are still growing, but the growth rate is not that high. Over 100% or 86 or 44. You have to be aware that the growth rate in the future will be slower next year. They might report a growth rate over 10%, that's possible, but don't expect the same growth rate over 40%. You might see 10, 20 or 30%, something like this. Same for their profits, they won't grow that much. And this slow in their growth rate happened because of competition. You see here, the big players. I mean, the entire market, better said. With rate is Alibaba, which lost from its market share from almost 60%, quite even more than that, to 40%. Then you have JD, which maintains its market share, about 20%. And then you have Pinduoduo or PDD Holdings, which has succeeded to increase their market share. Same, about 20%. It was lower in the past, but then they have succeeded to increase that market share. And then you have other two competitors. Douyin, if you don't know this name, is the TikTok of China, e-commerce from TikTok, where you can see a huge increase in their market share from 2022 to 2023, and Kuaishou, if I pronounce it correctly. Another player, which has a smaller market share. Now, all these players are competing for that revenue. As China has over 1 billion people, they can all grow in the future and make money. Because as you can see, if you look at China, their GDP is still growing. Not that much as it was in 2021, an amazing growth rate over 18%, but still they are growing by more than 4% a year, as you can see here, 5 to 4%. And that's great. That's their driver, the main driver of Chinese companies. And on top of that is China economy, which now went down, and also all Chinese stocks went down. Exception is PDD Holdings. Because of that high growth rate, they succeeded to report a higher return on investment. But you have to be very careful of the growth rate of PDD Holdings or Pinduoduo. You already see from their numbers that the growth rate is slowing down because of competition. There are a lot of players. And then you also have to ask, how do they make money? As you can see, they make money from online marketing services, advertising on their platform. Half of the revenue comes from there, and the other half from transaction services. Every time a merchant sells a product, PDD Holdings gets a commission, a fee, a small fee, maybe 0.5% or 1%. It depends on their merchants, their size. Now, what I don't like about PDD Holdings, yes, the revenue is growing a lot, but look at their most important indicator. Total expenses, operating expenses. You see here, sales and marketing expenses are about 4.3 billion, right? 4.3 billion. The money they use to attract consumers on their platforms. And if you compare this amount, 4.3 billion from PDD Holdings, to Alibaba for the last quarter Q3, you can see that Alibaba used the same amount, 4.6 billion, in sales and marketing expenses. But be aware that the revenue of Alibaba was 2 times higher than PDD Holdings, and they have more businesses. And when you look at this company and PDD Holdings, you can see the difference. Which one has a better moat? For instance, for PDD Holdings, it takes 4.3 billion to generate 14 billion in revenue. And the same amount for Alibaba, as you can see here, sales and marketing expenses, 4.6 billion to generate 43 billion in revenue. So it's a big difference. Now, you might say that Alibaba has other businesses, right? For instance, e-commerce, international, logistics, and local services. And of course, digital media. If you look only at Taobao and Tmall, they're about the same, 14 billion. And PDD Holdings, 14 billion. So they're about the same size. If you compare PDD Holdings with Alibaba e-commerce China, they're about the same size. But still, the other segments requires also marketing expenses. So if you exclude those businesses, their expenses will be much lower. That's why you have to be very careful with PDD Holdings, because the growth rate is slowing down due to competition, not only Alibaba, but also JD and TikTok. Imagine, every company is investing in advertising. They are trying to attract consumers to their platforms. First, they invest heavily in advertising, as PDD Holdings has been doing. And second, they lower their fees. Now, consumers will go where they will find cheaper products. And the company that will be able to offer the cheapest products will be the one that takes care of merchants and consumers. You have to understand this. If those companies lowers their take rate, their fees, and advertising services, the money they charge for advertising on their platforms, then consumers will go to that platform and also merchants. And the market share of that company will increase. Now, guess what will happen if all those companies will do the same thing? Who will win? Well, the answer may be obvious. None of them. Because their growth rate will slow down and their profits will go down. That's why you have to be very careful to understand their moats and who will be able to survive in this new market. Very competitive, as you've seen here. So, if you are planning to invest in PDD Holdings, be aware that the growth rate won't be that high. It will be much lower. As I said, at the current price, you can get a 10% annual return without too much growth rate. But if they succeed to increase their growth rate, then your return may be much higher. Now, the risk, the downside, you have to be aware of competition. Because if they don't increase the market share, yes, you get a 10% annual return. But if they start losing market share to other competitors like TikTok or JD, then that will be a major problem for you. Because your return won't be 10%, but it will go down. The market cap can go down even more than this. That's why you have to be very careful with this investment. So it's up to you how you want to invest in this company. And if you have other questions, please let me know in the comments.